Welcome to Dangerous Skills, where we explore issues of life, faith, and personal security. I'm your host, Charles Powell. Today's skill is thankfulness, whatever the environment. In the Bible, in the book of Philippians, chapter 1, verse 3, the Apostle Paul wrote, "I thank God every time I remember you." He wrote this line in a letter he sent to the Christians at the Macedonian church. He visited a number of times at Philippi. Paul basically established the church there, so he held very fond memories of this group of believers. At the time he wrote this letter, Paul's circumstances were indeed very bad. Paul was in prison, not of his own making. The prison would not feed prisoners, so without outside help, prisoners would starve. He was in a bad situation. Prisoners were brutally executed, perhaps daily. This was the atmosphere in which Paul lived. Conditions were very harsh. Paul probably wrote this letter wearing chains. In his letter, Paul continued in Philippians 1, 4 through 6. "Whenever I pray, I make my requests known for all of you with joy, for you have been my partners in spreading the good news about Christ from the time you first heard it until now. And I am certain that God, who began the good work within you, will continue His work until it is finally finished on the day when Christ Jesus returns." Now, let's talk about Paul's everyday. Every day, Paul had to give his circumstances to God. He was in prison. He was in chains. He had to admit his chains. Speaking of chains, he had to admit they were real, and he had to live in them. And he had to overcome fear, hunger, and want. Then Paul gave thanks in spite of his environment and lived his calling in the middle of that dark, filthy prison. Regardless of your circumstances, find God during your test and accomplish your calling, chains and all. "I thank God every time I remember you," the Apostle Paul wrote. Well, I thank God for my journey and for the people, for better or for worse, who formed me along the way, and for the struggles which have guided me to God in whatever environment. Maybe you should consider your environment and your circumstances and be thankful wherever you are. That's all for today. I'll see you next time on Dangerous Skills.